So I'm asking you, is this work from home culture a help or a hindrance? Your thoughts. And it's all going on politically again today. I think now we're on to our 62nd Tory MP who says that they're not going to stand at the next election. We've got rumours of more no confidence letters in Rishi Sunak being submitted, and meanwhile, a brood of chickens have rocked up at Downing Street to mock Sunak for not calling an election. Yeah, you heard all that right. Your thoughts on it, please. And by the way, it's no better north of the border, because from next month in Scotland, you'll be able to drop into a sex shop to make an anonymous accusation of hate crime against someone basically that you dislike and potentially see the accused locked up. I speak, of course, of the new Hate Crime and Public Order Act. What on earth is going on with politics in our country, please? Is there any light at the end of some of these tunnels or not? And have you had a parking ticket recently? Because if so, you're not alone. Over 35,000 parking fines are issued every single day by private companies. Legislation was supposed to be introduced to rein some of these companies in. So why hasn't it been introduced? Yes, indeed. So a packed hour coming up. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's latest news headlines.
I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Former Prime Minister Liz Truss has accused Labour of preventing a debate on her bill which seeks to ban transgender women from female-only spaces and prevent them from competing in women's sports. It was due to be discussed in the Commons today, but MPs appeared to waste time to delay her debate. She told GBNews she was frustrated by the opposition party's stalling tactics.
My bill has been stopped today from being debated by the Labour Party, and I'm absolutely furious about that. They don't even want to talk about the importance of recognising biological sex. They don't want to talk about how we stop children being able to access puberty blockers that would actually stop their development. So they have spent today filibustering my bill and stopping it being talked about, even though over the last few weeks I've had a huge amount of public support from concerned parents, concerned teachers, from young people themselves who want these bill's measures put into law.
Now, the Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. Citing personal reasons, James Heapy says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. Downing Street says he'll be greatly missed in Parliament. He's also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons as speculation mounts over when the general election will be held. The Prime Minister has ruled out the 2nd of May. Lib Dem's leader, Sir Ed Davey, has accused him of running scared.
I think people are really fed up at this Conservative government and want to see the back of it. And the elections can't come quick enough for the Liberal Democrats and I think the people of our country. When those elections come, whenever Rishi Sunak decides to go to the palace, Liberal Democrats are ready. We've got fantastic candidates who are local champions in their areas. We're campaigning on things like the NHS and the need to tackle the crisis there, the cost of living and things like sewage.
Meanwhile, Labour has accused the Prime Minister of being too chicken to call an election. As a result, a group of activists dressed as chickens clucked outside Downing Street, demanding the Prime Minister name the date now. Labour added Rishi Sunak needs to stop squatting in number 10. A £5 million donation from Frank Hester has not yet been given to the Conservatives, with the senior party sources telling GB News talks about the funds are still underway. The businessman, who's already given the party £10 million, is accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. The Prime Minister, who's in Sunderland with the Chancellor today, is under pressure to return the donation. Jeremy Hunt says the Conservative Party follows due process when it comes to declaring funds.
We absolutely are transparent. We follow all the rules, the regulations. We believe in that transparency. Many of the laws about it we actually passed ourselves, and the Conservative Party fully complies with all the requirements to be transparent about our donations.
In other news, police say they've contacted the families of 35 people whose remains were recovered as part of an investigation into a funeral parlour in Yorkshire. The bodies and a quantity of ashes were respectfully removed from Legacy Independent Funeral Directors in Hull after concerns were raised about the storage and management processes relating to the care of the deceased. Humberside Police described it as a truly awful incident. 2 people arrested on a number of offences have been released on bail as inquiries continue. And the Defence Secretary has warned Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GBNews has been given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapps says NATO allies are ready and willing to protect themselves from any threat.
This exercise is designed to make sure that we can operate with other countries like Poland and be interoperable. Most importantly of all, sending a very clear signal to Putin or any other despotic leader that we will stand up for ourselves and don't try it on.
And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thank you very much for that. I've got to tell you, that funeral story in Hull, of course, my hometown, so many people are just so distressed by that story. Can you imagine when you very sadly lose a loved one? The very last thing you need to be thinking about is, you know, did I actually bury my loved one? Was that my loved one? These ashes that I treasure, is that my loved one? It's so, so awful. Of course, thoughts with everyone that is affected by that story. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, the Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the business owner, political commentator and former Labour councillor, Kevin Craig. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Looking very dapper tonight, you two.
Oh.
They've scrubbed up all right for you, haven't they, viewers? Look, it's nice.
I'd like to make an effort for you, Michelle.
It's very nice. You look very smart. Maybe I might be dropping a subtle hint to some of my other panellists that might be watching. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You might know who you are. Anyway, I've got a packed show coming up for you guys tonight. And you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? gbviews@gbnews.com is how you can reach me, or you can tweet or X me at GBNews. Speaking about style, this is not on my agenda, by the way, but I can't help it now that I've started that conversation. Cheltenham, they used to have Ladies' Day, and they've renamed it Style Day.
Have they?
Yes. Oh. What do you think to that?
Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I used to go to Cheltenham a lot.
Luckily for you, I am the font of all knowledge.
Well, yes, you
all
are.
The interesting big
I
news,
genuinely
everyone.
don't know what to say.
It's all very odd, isn't it?
Well, it's
Ladies'
whitewashing
Day.
women out of society.
Is that what we think it is?
Yeah, I think that's been going on for quite some time. I think that's what the whole trans thing is about. And a lot of women feel that they're not being treated seriously as members of society anymore. Well,
that might come up in conversation because Liz Truss, we'll come on to her, she was trying to get something debated in the Commons today about kind of similar, these kind of topics. She didn't have much success, as you just heard about in that headline. But you know what? I'm all for anything that celebrates style, because so often people don't make much of an effort anymore, do they? They go out looking like they're being dragged out of a dustbin half the time, myself included, by the way. I can't claim to be a style icon all the time. Anyway, look, let's talk politics, shall we? Because have you seen the goings on? I mean, where do we even begin, everybody? So we've had a situation today. We've had the 62nd Tory MP now say that they will not stand again. This whole notion of when are the Tories going to call a general election? Will it be this date? Will it be that date? Whatever. Some people were suggesting it should have been early May, perhaps the same date as the local elections. That now is not going to happen. I'll just remind you, in case you've just tuned in, you've had this whole brood of chickens descend on Downing Street. Listen to this. I mean, son, what did you do? What did you get up to at work today? Well, Mum, I dressed as a chicken, meets Rishi Sunak and clucked outside of Downing Street. A job someone's got to do, I'm sure. But anyway, of course, he's been called chicken. People are saying we need to have a general election now. Apparently, Daniel, there's rumours of no confidence letters going in. More and more, apparently, if rumours to be believed, with Rishi Sunak. What do you make to it all?
Well, these people in the chicken suits, I'm assuming they're people from the leader's office, the opposition leader's office, Starmer's office, out there dressed like that. And just remember, if you vote Labour, these are the people who are going to be running the country. because they'll all be in Downing Street with him, with or without their chicken suits. I mean, it's a complete joke, the whole thing, isn't it? You know, you don't want these people anywhere near the...
Your lot never dressed up.
As far as we
Daniel?
dress up properly in suits and ties, out of respect for the public.
You've dressed up in the past, your lot. You've done the same.
No.
What do you make to that stunt?
I think it's fair enough. I thought we livened up the day's news agenda, actually. I mean, a lot of people do think he's chickened out, don't they?
Well, so do you think there should be a general election? Perhaps let's just use that provisional date that people wanted on the 2nd of May.
Well, I think it should come sooner rather than later, just because Rishi himself has not been elected by the British public. He was elected by a very small...
Gordon Brown. Just like Gordon Brown, who wasn't even elected by members of the Labour Party because he ensured there were no other candidates the Putin style.
Well, I'm not sure about that comparison, but the Putin reference. But the Gordon, we hadn't had so many prime ministers. I was about to say at the end of so many prime ministers and so much change. I think it's particularly, you know.
Yeah, but them's the rules, though, isn't it? So if everyone was fine when it did happen, say, with the Brown example that we've just been quoting, then if people were livid about it, then they could have changed the rules, but no one did.
Yeah, I'm not saying he hasn't got the right to carry on, but I think there is a sense out there that many people would welcome a general election now. I think you'd probably agree with that, wouldn't you?
Me personally, I get myself into trouble about this because I'm not someone that's sitting here desperate. Oh, yeah, please take me to the ballot box with my pencil, please. I'm not really in that camp. And if I was Rishi Sunak, I think I'd be in two minds because part of me, Daniel, would be thinking, do you know what, I'm absolutely fed up of all of this now. You know what, have it, somebody else. The flip side of it would be, do you know what, no, I want to cling on to power for as long as I can, see whether or not I can turn things around.
Well,
Where is he?
I'm sure he's in two minds because all prime ministers keep all the options open until the last minute. So he's thinking, I'm sure, about lots of different dates, and he's in two minds or even more than two minds about when it should be. I personally wrote an article a couple of weeks ago in one of the Sunday papers saying I thought we should have an early general election because there are lots of problems to be solved, and basically the civil service is not working for the government anymore. They're not doing anything. They're all imagining there's going to be a Starmer government, and they've got their eyes on that. And also because although things are bad in the polls for the Conservatives at the moment, it is possible they'll get better, but it's just as possible that they'll get worse. So I think there is a case for going to the country relatively soon, not necessarily on the 2nd of May, because I think that confuses it with the local elections, but it could be sometime before the summer. And we could then have a decision made by the electorate about where we go.
Yeah.
And
I think, you know, clinging on to the very end, I think will damage the Conservatives, because I think people will see that as being, well, what are you achieving during this period? And I think...
Trying to achieve results, surely trying to... Because people will say the Tories have had 14 years to do whatever it is, but actually, surely then your pushback should be, or would be, well, first of all, you had a coalition, then you've had all of the kind of backlash, if you like, or trying to steady the ship off the back of Brexit, then literally, then you've had COVID, then you're trying to get back on your feet after COVID, then you've had the Ukraine war, then you've tried to get yourself back on the feet there, and then you've had the situation in Israel and Gaza, so really, there's not been a second of breathing space.
Yeah, you could say
I should do the Tory party PR.
Are you in the right job?
I know.
And all of that is very true and very important. I don't think we're talking about the last 14 years, though. I think we're talking about what the Prime Minister has promised he's going to do this year. And he's given us 5 pledges. Don't ask me exactly what all 5 are. But the question...
You don't know your 5 pledges?
No, I don't go around with a pledge card.
Enough.
That was a Labour thing.
That's fair enough that he doesn't. It's fair enough that he doesn't.
Why is it?
Because he's working all day, and I think the idea that you put someone on the spot to show that they've learnt the mantra and they can be a good boy or girl and recite them by heart.
No, let me be clear. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot and get you into trouble for not knowing them, but these are the collective 5 priorities of the nation now. This is what he said that he wants to be judged on, but they're all things that we, as a collective, should try and want to make progress towards. Can you remember the 5?
I think I just remember the budget that Liz Truss did that stuck all our mortgages up by record sums. That's what we don't talk about enough.
But you see, this is fascinating to me because if you can't even recite, not recite, that sounds like some kind of weirdo cult thing, which I don't intend to suggest, but if people don't even know what the 5 are, so it was something like cut debt, grow the economy, stop the boats, waiting lists for the NHS and inflation. There you go.
Yeah, we got them.
Yeah, we did.
But people will judge, Michelle, sorry to interrupt, because it's the danger of being slightly pro-conservative, this discussion, but they've had a long time in office on all these things, and that outside of the Westminster bubble, and you'll be aware of this because you're out and about, but people are asking, do I feel better off after... It is a 14-year Conservative leadership.
Yeah,
that's
but then
the question.
what would you say then to the points that I just raised? Because if I was Sunak, that's the kind of thing that I would be saying. You've had these humongous global events that are outside the control of any leader, whether it would be Starmer or Sunak or whoever.
I think that there is an attempt by the Conservatives to get themselves off the hook for example, the NHS has got record waiting lists. It didn't under Labour.
No,
mortgages have gone up, and ordinary men and women and families are paying loads of more money as a result of what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did overnight. That's real. They impacted on so many lives, and they're not going to be allowed off the hook, guys.
It's complete fantasy. Mortgage interest rates are high. They're at the same level as they were under Blair, by the way. We had artificially low interest rates from 2008 until recently, and that released inflation eventually. Mortgage rates have gone up in order to bring inflation down. That will be one of the 5 successes, because we will have brought inflation down even further by the end of the year, almost certainly. That's the one thing you can bank on in the 5 of the 5 pledges. But the cost to that, because inflation is a monetary phenomenon, is that you have to have higher interest rates. That's nothing to do with Liz Truss's budget. That's to do with a strategy for bringing inflation down. And we've succeeded in doing that. On the other things, though, it's going to be difficult for the government. I think it's got to pass the Rwanda bill, and I think that will happen probably in the course by the end of April. I think the bill will have got royal assent, but he will have needed, by then, he'll need to show the planes taking off and people leaving. And then I think people will be convinced that something is actually happening in relation to that particular problem. But, you know, there is progress on some of the other topics, but not necessarily enough.
You see, many people now, like John, for example, you know, Kevin's saying that he wants in a general election pretty much straight away whenever we could. But John's saying, but when would we even learn what Labour's key policies are?
Well, I would say to John that they're all out there. I mean, they're so good, our policies, right? Daniel's party's nicking them. Right, and we were told for years, oh, you can't clamp down on the tax exemptions for non-doms. It's a terrible idea. It will disincentivise business people like myself, because, you know, or those from abroad. And now the Conservative Party stole that policy, whether it's on the NHS, schools, crime, GB Energy, the environment, industrial strategy. There are clear missions that have been set out by Keir, and the manifesto will be costed. So I totally respect John's desire for more detail, but, you know, Labour are not in government at the moment, and the government are stealing Labour's policies when they get the chance. And I just get the sense, you know, I'm trying to be very fair and balanced in this, and I just get the sense that people think the Tories have had their go.
Well, there you go, John. Apparently those policies are out there. You just need to look slightly harder. You say as well, Kevin, that the Tories, for example, shouldn't be let off the hook in terms of interest rates with mortgage. What I think that so many people shouldn't be let off the hook, quite frankly, with their ridiculous, and we disagree, but their ridiculous panicked response to COVID. It was that when you point out things like inflation, waiting lists, this mental health crises that everyone seems to have these days, you can almost boil so much of it down to the over-hysterical reaction to COVID, this blanket response to lock everybody down irrespective of their risk level. And many of the politicians would have had us locked down for a much, much longer period than they currently did. And a harder lockdown as well. I would say that is some of the things that people perhaps shouldn't forget. Anyway, look, when we come back after the break... Well, look at him. He's groaning. I'll give him a chance to respond to me. I can handle that. He can respond to me after the break. We'll continue the politics conversation. I also want to talk to you about the SNP. It's going even crazier up north, if that is even to be believed. Liz Truss, I want to talk about her as well, so don't go anywhere, and I'll see you in 2.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism And parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer
fine.
the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how can, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and with you till 7 o'clock tonight. There is so much we need to get stuck into tonight, not least on the politics side of everything. So luckily for me, I've got a great panel, a Conservative peer, live peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the business owner, political commentator and former Labour councillor, Kevin Craig, who was doing like a big groan before the break. What's the matter?
Well, I can't say nothing. Every time you mention COVID and you talk about the politicians, how they got this wrong, that wrong, I am obliged for balance to say that we were faced with a historic challenge. People were dying left, right and centre. The lockdowns were needed, in my opinion. The vaccines came through. And the biggest scandal, actually, is the billions of pounds of our public money wasted by contracts to Tory pals, the VIP fast lanes, e.g. Baroness Moan. But there you are. That's balance.
There you go. You see, consider yourself balanced. We used to have these arguments at the time, didn't we?
We did.
This is not
too many times to mention.
This is not hindsight stuff, ladies and gents. We used to disagree at length during those periods. I remember it well. I'll never, ever forget it. Look, I do want to touch upon what time is it. In about 7 minutes' time, the Lib Dem conference will commence. Just quickly tell me, do you think the Lib Dems are still relevant in today's political...
Oh, I think they're relevant and terrifying, because...
Relevant and terrifying?
And terrifying, because there's a real prospect in parts of the country, especially in the southwest and southeast even, where they've got historical roots, there's a real prospect that they will actually win seats at a general election. And that I do find very terrifying, because they're a party with no political principle whatsoever, low-grade and poorly qualified politicians. And the idea that they're going to be sitting there in large numbers in the House of Commons is very worrying. And they might even, I can't predict the result of a general election, they might even possibly hold the balance of power. Not on the present polls, I have to admit, but who knows how those polls will translate on election day. None of us can forecast that. And I think it's absolutely terrifying. We've had experience of them before. And I'd worry about it a great deal, especially if I were living in that part of the country. I wouldn't want a Liberal Democrat representing me.
Kevin?
Well, the answer to the question is they are very relevant. They are going to win seats at the general election, probably most of them from the Conservative Party, and they are still a very significant force at local government across the country, and they do deserve, like all the major parties, to be respected and taken seriously.
Well, there you go. As I just said, their spring conference commences in about 5 minutes' time. In case you're wondering, what shall I do with my weekend? There
Friday night.
Yeah, you can focus yourself on that stuff. Not until after Dewbs and Co's finish, though, of course. Anyway, look, let's talk hate monsters. I could be describing anyone, really, couldn't I? But I'm not. I'm describing a specific advert. Listen and watch.
You might know this thing here. It's the hate monster. When you're feeling insecure, when you feel angry, he'll be there, feeding off the emotions. Getting bigger and bigger till he's weighing you down. He'll make you want to have a go at somebody. A neighbour, somebody on the street, on a night out, security guy on the door, somebody in the chippy, your taxi driver. He'll make you want to vent your anger, just 'cause folk look or act different for you. The hate monster wants you to feel like you need to show you're better than them. Then, before you know it, you've committed a hate crime. Doesn't make you feel better though, does it? Maybe for a minute, but then you just feel worse, don't you? 'Cause the hate just hangs about like a bad smell. But it doesn't need to be like this. You're better than that, and you know it. You've got all this energy, so do something positive with it. The hate monster doesn't like that. In fact, he hates it. Go on. Be good to yourself. Don't feed the hate monster.
Obviously, I'm desperately trying my best now not to do my fantastic accent impression. I don't think you can do that in this day and age. If I did, I'd probably find myself in trouble because these are new laws which commence. They take effect from the 1st of April in Scotland. It's the hate crime law, to be precise. And there's a lot of criticism. I mean, that advert on its own, by the way, says Scotland Police Scotland. They wrote on their website that it was men aged 18 to 30 from socially excluded communities with ideas about white male entitlement that are particularly likely to be perpetrators of hate crime. I can tell you now, many people have reacted in not a pleasant way to that. But these new hate crime laws, so many people now are saying that it's all gone too far. The police have said that they're going to respond. They're going to look at every single one of these that's reported, which has created a backlash in itself because the police, for low-level crimes, are not really doing as much as they ought to be, perhaps, in Scotland. But where are you on all of this, Danny?
Well, the biggest hate crimes at the moment, of course, the most obvious ones, are the outbreak of anti-Semitism we're seeing in the country. And that isn't mentioned at all because the left have decided that they want to focus the whole hate crime agenda on the white working classes and on their views. And the police Scotland are quite explicit about that. If you're poor, if you're white, if you're male, they're coming for you for a hate crime. And all it means very often is you're expressing views that are quite normal in your community and that many people would share. I'm deeply worried about the whole notion of hate crime. It's a new idea. It obviously involves censorship. And there are occasions, I grant, when censorship might be appropriate. In very extreme cases, censorship might be appropriate. But there's a very delicate balance to get right there. And it's been pushed all the wrong way. And people are now being shut up and visited by the police and threatened by the police because of things that they've said. And who knows, next it'll be things that you've thought or written down and so on. And private communications in families, they'll be coming for those as well. And this is a very, very clear left-wing agenda to make war on ordinary people. That's what they're trying to do. And no mention, of course, of hate crime from the left, the anti-Semitism we're seeing, any of that sort. That's all being wiped out of it. The threat they're trying to say is always going to come from the right, and by the right, they mean the poor, the working class, the male, the whites.
Kevin?
I mean, this story is about something that's been done in Scotland. I don't think that the ad itself is a particularly effective piece of communication. The ad was it was a 6-week online ad that ran in spring 2023 and is not as such linked to the legislation. I don't think it's very effective. I think a lot of the people who would be committing hate crimes are not going to look at that ad and go, oh, I'm going to change and turn into a nicer person. So I don't think it's effective. And then, you know, Daniel's characterising there, he's talking about the left this, the left that. I mean, you know, I just don't agree with a lot of that. There's a lot of people on the left in the Labour Party who are deeply concerned about increases in anti-Semitism, who've been very on the record about it. So I don't know who Daniel thinks has got a war on the white working class.
Oh,
but let me hang on, Daniel, just to say it, and then I'll shut up. I don't know who you think's got a war on the white working class, but I can tell you, as someone who came from that background, it's not the Labour Party, so I don't know who has.
Well, it's the leadership of the SNP, isn't it, who are doing this? They just said yourself, it's in Scotland, it's the Scottish government, it's led by the SNP. I made no reference to the Labour Party.
Yeah, but I think you said the left.
The left. These people are extreme leftists. The SNP government in SNP Green Coalition in Scotland is an example of an extreme left-wing government. Even in Wales, Mark Drakeford, a recognised Corbynista, has been running a government for some years, he's standing down now, running a government for some years, which is well to the left of where Keir Starmer would be, which is why he's not actually welcome in Keir Starmer's councils and leadership office.
I find this, what's going on in Scotland, these new laws, particularly concerning because, for me, nobody really has got a right not to be offended. I mean, I wouldn't deliberately go out and try and upset someone or hurt somebody or whatever, but life, that is life. You are allowed to dislike somebody. You are allowed to dislike something. I mean, heaven forbid if that's your gravity, you're even allowed to hate something. It's not a criminal offence. And this whole notion that actually if someone perceives that you have acted in a way that's hurtful or whatever, hateful, you could then be criminalised. They've popped up all of these kind of reporting places now. So one of them that's been in the news a lot is a sex shop where people can go in. You can anonymously log this hate crime now. This can all be logged and all the rest of it. It could just be someone with a grievance against you. Some of this stuff, by the way, you could even be saying in your own home.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't it always the case that people with grievances against you could always try and twist the law and abuse it to try and get at a person? But I mean, isn't the background to a lot of the legislation around hate crimes about just trying to make people feel safer? Isn't that like a good thing to seek, you know, to try and minimise violence against women, racism, you know, homophobic crime? Isn't that a good thing?
Of course, and I want people, like I particularly don't like, I don't like awful bullying, I don't like nasty bullying, and I like, you know, I've got a little boy and I see the way children interact with each other and I see if a child is being unkind to each other. I don't like any of that, but at the same time, life isn't always a bed of roses.
I know.
People are allowed to have negative feelings towards things and others or whatever without necessarily ending up with a criminal record because of it. What do you guys make to it at home? Before I move off politics, I do just want to mention another story we just covered in those headlines there. Liz Truss, she was very passionate about a bill she wanted to be debated in Parliament today. Long story short, they didn't get round to it. In essence, it was about trying to make sex refer to biological sex. Where are you on her bill?
Yeah, I think it's completely right. I think it's completely right, and the bill should be taken up by the government and passed. And I think Pete would do the Conservatives a lot of good, because that's what most people think. The fact is that biological sex is a fact. It's a scientific fact, whereas gender is an ideology. It's something that's been invented in the last 50 years or so, and it's grown. And the idea you can choose your gender is just a lie. It isn't true. Biological sex is a discernible fact, and with lots of scientific evidence for it.
Where are you on Liz Truss's thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of consensus around biological sex and those sorts of issues. But Liz Truss, I'm afraid, you know, she's just trying desperately to be relevant. And legislation doesn't get through Parliament all the time, private members' bills, etc. But she is trying not to talk about her record in office and her playbook. Just be a bit of context. She's just been to America, right, which was a really controversial visit. And she is trying to reinvent herself
What's
after being...
controversial about her visit to America?
OK, well, at one point, she was in the audience and heard somebody called a hero who's actually a far-right politician and said nothing about it,
well,
right?
I know exactly what you're referring to. You're
Didn't that
referring to... Yeah, it did happen. You're referring to someone else who described, I think it was Tommy Robinson, as a hero, and then everyone else started crying, saying that Liz Truss should have intervened. And I thought, what a load of nonsense. Who is Liz Truss to intervene in someone else's thought process about who that person as an individual is regarding as a hero? And I think the context, if I remember rightly, and correct me if I'm wrong, what the person was saying was that Tommy Robinson was a hero for the work that he'd done in trying to expose the grooming gangs.
I think there's a different reading of that whole event, which is that she, as a former Prime Minister of our country, gave tacit endorsement to comments and speeches that a lot of people vehemently disagree with, and maybe others agree with them. But I'm just saying, you know, that that context, for many people, she is a failed Prime Minister trying to find a way of being relevant.
Yeah, do you know what? I can tell you now, right, there'll be lots of people, perhaps primarily women, biological women, that actually think that this whole notion of defining biological sex has been really clear and key when it comes to single-sex spaces, in particular, for women, and women's safety are absolutely key. And they're very angry and upset today, actually, that didn't get the discussion time that it needed, and fingers crossed that it perhaps will in the very near future, because it is a critical issue for so many people. Your thoughts, GBviews at gbnews.com. On all of what we've been discussing tonight are very welcome. I'll bring you into the conversation after the break. Let me ask you this. Have you got a parking fine recently? 35,000 of them issued by private companies every single day. What is going on? I'll see you in 2.
Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. For many of us, it's actually going to turn quite chilly tonight. Could be a touch of frost before some rain arrives tomorrow. That's in association with a system waiting out in the Atlantic. Before that, though, we do have a ridge of high pressure building, and that's going to quieten our weather down as we go through the end of the day. So many of the daytime showers will clear away and die out, leaving a mostly dry and often clear night. As a result, because of the clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, temperatures will take a bit of a drop. It's going to be markedly colder than some recent nights. Touch of frost is possible, particularly in rural spots, especially across parts of Scotland. As we go through tomorrow itself, then, watch out for a few pockets of mist and fog first thing. Once these clear, lots of fine sunny weather across northern and eastern parts, but towards the south and west here we are going to see clouds spilling its way in, but this won't really reach northern and eastern parts until later in the afternoon. Some wet weather around, could be heavy at times, particularly across Northern Ireland, but after a chilly start, temperatures rising, so most places likely to get into double figures. Any wet weather clears through as we go through early on Sunday, so a bit of a wet start across some southeastern parts perhaps, but thereafter Sunday actually looks largely dry. A scattering of showers for sure, and also some outbreaks of more persistent rain across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but most of us will see some sunny breaks. Monday doesn't look too wet, but further rain is on the cards for Tuesday. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
That's a fair point.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock. The Tory peer in the House of Lords, Daniel Moylan, and the business owner, political commentator and former Labour councillor, Kevin Craig. Lisa says, Kevin didn't answer your question. He dodged it by having a rant about Liz Truss. What question did I ask him?
I've no idea. I just don't, I want to stop thinking about Liz Truss.
About her you said her gender bill, whatever it's called, was relevant.
Yeah.
You admitted it was relevant, Kevin, but then you didn't go on to say why you didn't support it.
I didn't say I didn't support it. I just think that...
you just wanted to witter on about...
No, I said... No, I didn't. Hang on. I said there's...
Get back to the issue, which is about women's safety and the question of sex and gender. That's what people want to hear.
There's loads of consensus around those issues, Daniel. Some people, like Liz Truss, want to whip up... because she wants to try and project and use it as an issue to be relevant again after being a disastrous Prime Minister.
This is a typical leftist response, is to say there isn't a disagreement about this. There isn't a culture war. It's all being manufactured by the Tories or by the right. But there are real differences on this, and they're physically built differences. You can see them. You go into a building and you have the toilets are arranged like this.
Well, they're in here. I mean, I find it funny.
I find it. Is that something that you want to see continue? That's the question.
Well, I'm interested in listening to what women say, not my opinion. I'm listening to what women say on the subject. That's what I'll listen to.
Obviously, I can't supply that. Maybe Michelle can.
Well, yeah, I think
maybe the viewers can.
I think the people should actually spend more time listening to actual women and what they think, as opposed to listening to men who just wake up one day and think that they're somehow a woman and therefore should be regarded as one. There you go. Andy says, Michelle, you're talking about hate crime. If I hate everyone, is that all right? Because surely I'm being inclusive and not diverse. I don't actually think it works like that, Andy. I've got to be honest with you there. Liz Truss is furious that Labour have blocked her debates, yes. But I've got to say, many people will say it wasn't just Labour, because, of course, there was a lot of talk about ferrets and things like that in the run-up and beyond. Liz Truss was a real Tory, but it was the work lot that pulled her out, says Darryl. Gladys says, please, can everyone stop blaming Liz for mortgage rate rises? It was the banks that were to blame for not raising them earlier on. And she says Liz basically became a scapegoat.
Oh, Lord.
Steve says those chickens that you had earlier on, they look like the Labour front bench. That's not very nice, is it? John says Sunak has achieved absolutely nothing. He wasn't even elected. Please, can you get him out? There you go. Let's talk parking fines. Private parking firms apparently are issuing over 35,000 parking tickets to drivers every single day. It absolutely blew my mind, that figure. Where are you on this, Kevin?
Well, I think it's a really good story that's been highlighted that you've picked tonight, because I think essentially this comes down to is that there was a new code of practice, the Parking Code of Practice Act. It made its way onto the statute book in Parliament, a number of years ago, and it hasn't come into law. And I think this, when we're talking about how people feel about issues, I think loads of people feel really powerless and ordered around with the whole parking ticket scene, how the rights that you don't have to appeal, how there's no compassion in the system, and it feels like you're just being rinsed. So I think the RAC is right to say that drivers feel badly let down, and the government, with the support of all parties, should get on and implement this code of practice, which will reduce and which will bring in a cap on tickets, because I think that some parking companies are making excessive profits off the back of drivers.
And DVLA, by the way, they're making a pretty penny as well by selling our data to such companies. Lord Moylan, where are you?
Well, I think it'll be clear there's a difference here between parking on street and getting a fine and parking on private land. And I think this is more about parking on private land. Because if you park on the street and you get a parking ticket, it may indeed be given to you by a private company, but they don't set the fines. They act as agents for the local authorities, and the local authorities set the fines through democratic processes. And in places like London, they set them collectively. So it's the same across London. It's all agreed amongst the local authorities. And those people do not make a profit from the fines. They get paid. Those companies get paid for providing that service and having those people out on the street. There's a big difference if you park on private land. You park on private land, you can get really confusing signs. You can get clamped. And by the way, if you park on the street, you do have an appeal, and there is an appeal system, and it's easily accessible. You don't need lawyers or anything like that if you want to go and appeal. But these people on private land, there's no appeal. There's no control over what they charge. There's no clarity about signs. Signs have to be, on the street, have to be absolutely word perfect and spot on. You get the sign wrong and all the appeals will succeed if you're a local authority. But that's not true if you're on private land. And I think this is more to do with private land. But I agree with you. The government should get on, bring the code in. I don't know what this legal challenge consisted of that the parking operators brought. But if you can get round a legal challenge by amending the Act of Parliament to address it, you could get that through in 5 minutes, I'd have thought.
Well, there you go. And you guys at home will be shouting, won't you? Well, why are they not doing that then? And that is a key question, isn't it? I think we've all just learnt from that segment that we're all in the wrong job, quite frankly, and we all need to set up a private parking firm.
And get some private land that we can let people park on and then zap them.
Indeed, indeed. Steve says, Michelle, if the whole country was like you and decided not to vote, what would happen in the country? I've never told anyone, by the way, this is off the back of the conversation we had the other day, I've never told anybody not to vote. It's none of my business if you vote. If you want to vote, I hope that you do, and if you don't, I think that's OK too. I just think that politicians need to work harder to engage people more, to make sure that as many people are politically as engaged as they possibly can be. And I feel that right now...
Did you vote for the Brexit Party when you were a candidate?
I voted for well, I've got to say, I ran in the last 2 elections, not just once. And when I get accused of, oh, Michelle's not, she's not engaged with democracy and all the rest of it, you can't get much more engaged. I thought everyone else was so rubbish that rather than just abstaining, I decided to put my money where my mouth was and stand not once, but twice.
But did you actually go to a ballot? I don't know if you stood in the place where you were registered, but did you go to the place and you put your ballot paper in the box twice?
And I stood there with a clipboard.
So Michelle does vote when she's a candidate.
And I stood there with a clipboard, everybody, checking off things and doing it all. I was very, very engaged. Now, I say, actually, that the calibre of people that we have is so lacking that, actually, I do look around and think, do you know what? Why bother? Why?
Can I say something?
Very quickly, because I've got to go to a break 2 minutes ago, but very quick.
There are thousands of high-calibre people involved in politics across the parties, making big sacrifices to do it.
There you go. That's a nice note to end it on, isn't it? Dewberry Tavern opens up after the break, and I want to talk to you about working from home. Civil servants apparently balloting for strike action because they've got to go back to work in the office. What's going on? See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm sure you have seen this video that went viral this week, and if you haven't, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. This is a firefighter leaning on a fence whilst watching a trapped driving instructor's car sink in 4 feet of floodwater. Looks very comfortable there, doesn't he? Just leaning against the fence.
Just chilling, just relaxing. There were two. There were, in fact, 2 Essex fire and rescue crews, an ambulance and a police car parked near the sinking vehicle, but they wouldn't enter the water because they had to wait for specialist crews who were trained for the water depth.
Well, 2 people who weren't going to sit back and watch were these 2, Jack and Danielle Price, who took it upon themselves to rescue the submerged driver. And Danielle joins us now. Very good morning to you, Danielle, and you are a hero, an absolute hero. What happened in this video? Make sense of it for us.
So we were filming in the area for our YouTube channel, and we've seen the fire brigade come through. I was actually out at 5 o'clock in the morning with my husband, Jamie. We know it always happens there, as you can see, and it was clear. We've seen the fire brigade come through, we've followed them, and they're just standing around as if nothing's happened. In the clip, it says he's fine, he's on his phone, and then sort of walked away. But what they failed to realise is when my partner actually opened the door, as you can hear, he's on the phone to the sort of the emergency crew in panic, thinking he's going to sink. So we could not just sit there and watch. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah, poor bloke. Well done, you. Do you reckon this is health and safety gone mad?
It is, because although I do sympathise with them, they are so red-taped, but surely sort of common sense has to kick in as open the door.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. It's my favourite moment of the week, quite frankly. Dewberry Tavern is open. The weekend is officially commenced. So cheers to you guys. Lord Moylan, Kevin Craig, cheers to you guys at home. Cheers, everybody. We could just call it a day there, couldn't we? Just go off to the pub. But no, we're way more professional than that, everybody, because there's one more thing that I want to talk to you about, and that is about this whole culture of working from home, because civil servants now at the Office for National Statistics, they have threatened to potentially go on strike. Why? Well, because they've been asked to return to the office and work there 2 days a week. Kevin Craig, you are a very successful businessman. This whole working from home culture, it's changed so much now in society, hasn't it? But is it for the good or not?
It's partly for the good, and when we talk about this subject, I always like to say that there are many, many people listening or watching whose jobs wouldn't allow them to even start to have this discussion. So having said that, in the world of white-collar jobs, office jobs, I think that the union in question here risks being a little bit out of touch with the public, because it's all that's being asked is 2 days a week, right? Which is what we do in the business that I founded. And 2 days a week is not unreasonable. It really isn't. And insisting on fully remote working, I think that there is going to be very little support for that. That's it.
Daniel?
Yeah, well, I agree, and I wouldn't bother with them at all. I think, being at work in an organisation is a social relationship. Yeah. You acquire a sense of identity and a sense of collaboration with colleagues, and there is learning going on, and you judgments about your colleagues, how effective they are, and those all have a big effect on how the organisation runs. And much of that, not necessarily all of it, but much of that is annihilated if you're simply there on the other side of a screen, and you only participate occasionally in meetings, and most of the time you're working unsupervised, in your pyjamas, going to pieces, basically. Yeah. And I think it's bad for everybody's, what we call mental health nowadays. I think it's bad for the organisation, I think it's bad for productivity, and I think these guys, if they don't want to work in the office, they should just leave the job or get sacked.
In a minute, by the way, I just want to show you. Do you remember I showed you that lady that got stuck on the shutter? There's been a development in that story. I'll show it to you in a minute. John says, where are all these high-calibre people in politics that are hiding? Where are they hiding, John asks?
They're everywhere, John. They're everywhere. There are some in the cabinet. There are some many in the shadow cabinet. Councillors across the country. People of all parties sacrificing for public life.
Bernard says, but if anyone doesn't vote, they have no right at all to criticise government or anything. And I agree, by the way. That's why I did say, because of the job that I do, I'm going to force myself this time to get involved. If I didn't do this job, I assure you I wouldn't be. Anyway, Diana says, can I just ask you a question, Michelle, talking about civil service going on strike? Would we even notice if they have gone on strike? I think that's a very good question. One of my viewers, Carol, says her son has been waiting for his driving licence since March last year.
Wow.
This is how effective they all are, she says, working from home. Let me just show you this before we go. Did you see that lady that got her pants stuck on the shutters? Poor woman. She was leaning casually, wasn't she? Up she goes, up goes her shopper bag. I think it's absolutely fabulous. Of course, this lady, she went absolutely viral. Well, I don't know if you've seen now, they've made like a painting of her. They've put her, now she's been immortalised, onto this shutter. There you go, look at that. I think it's absolutely fabulous, isn't it? Anne Hughes, that's her name, 72 years old. She can see the funny side of it.
Is she all right after all that?
Yeah, she's absolutely fine. She works there, I think, at that shop. I think she was a cleaner or something. Anyway, she's famous now. Look at that. And she's put forever now on those shutters. It's always nice to be able to see the funny side of things, isn't it? Look, this is all we've got time for. It absolutely flies, doesn't it, when you are having fun. I can tell you now, so many people are not appreciating the whole desire to want to stay at home working forever, pretty much. Anyway, look, that's all I've got time for. Kevin, Daniel, thank you. Thank you. At home, don't go anywhere. Lee Anderson up next. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. For many of us, it's actually going to turn quite chilly tonight. Could be a touch of frost before some rain arrives tomorrow. That's in association with a system waiting out in the Atlantic. Before that, though, we do have a ridge of high pressure building, and that's going to quieten our weather down as we go through the end of the day. So many of the daytime showers will clear away and die out, leaving a mostly dry and often clear night. As a result, because of the clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, temperatures will take a bit of a drop. It's going to be markedly colder than some recent nights. Touch of frost is possible, particularly in rural spots, especially across parts of Scotland. As we go through tomorrow itself, then watch out for a few pockets of mist and fog first thing. Once these clear, lots of fine sunny weather across northern and eastern parts, but towards the south and west here we are going to see clouds spilling its way in, but this won't really reach northern and eastern parts until later in the afternoon. Some wet weather around, could be heavy at times, particularly across Northern Ireland, but after a chilly start, temperatures rising, so most places likely to get into double figures. Any wet weather clears through as we go through early on Sunday, so a bit of a wet start across some southeastern parts perhaps, but thereafter Sunday actually looks largely dry. A scattering of showers for sure, and also some outbreaks of more persistent rain across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, but most of us will see some sunny breaks. Monday doesn't look too wet, but further rain is on the cards for Tuesday. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News.